It being 6:30, I'm calling this meeting of the Manchester Select Board to order. It is my intention to hear from anyone who wants to speak. It is also my hope to get home at a reasonable hour. So I ask that anyone who wishes to speak attempt to be brief, and if what you wish to say is that you agree with the previous speaker, you say that rather than repeating. Thank you very much. The next the first order of agenda is public comments on non-agenda items. Please raise your hand if you would like to make a comment on a non-agenda item.
Can't see the board.
I don't see any hands.
Can't get the screen up yet. There you are.
Okay.
Yes.
I have no chairman's report. So we go to the first item on the agenda, which is a drought condition update. Greg, I think.
Sure, yeah, happy to provide some information. So we continue to do okay. I mean, the last couple of days we got an inch of rain. That's moving in the right direction, but it doesn't make up for the 10 plus inches that we're behind. So we're certainly still in a critical drought situation. Fortunately, our well and reservoirs are doing okay, as I say. We're not in dire need, but we continue to want to ask people to conserve, and that has been effective. We are seeing a reduction. We continue to see a reduction in daily use. So that's a big help. Under a non-drought condition, we're over 1 million gallons a day in the summer, and right now we're running 30% below that. So we've actually improved.
That's awesome.
We had 20% savings, and we've inched that up to about a 30% savings. So that's good. That's very helpful, and stretching our supplies while we wait for the rains to return. I know that there was some interest in talking about possible exemptions to the water ban for some essential uses, and it's up to.
Can you, in the past you have said that a concern was that if the drought conditions were to continue into November and December, then additional precipitation could be tied up in. So we're likely to stay in water conservation mode at least until the fall.
Yes. We most likely through the fall.
And quite possibly into the winter.
Possibly into the winter, yeah. So our ability to conserve in the winter months obviously is a lot less in terms of home use, indoor use.
Yeah.
But our total use in the wintertime is significantly lower as well. So during the winter, a daily average is maybe in the 400,000 gallons a day versus, like I say, 1 million plus in the peak of the summertime use.
My concern is that if this is in fact going to be our status for many months to come,
Right.
then we may be impacting people's businesses. And I'd like to hear what other businesses have to say.
My question would be, what businesses?
Well, one that
I
came
don't
up with somebody is a car detailing business.
I mean, the only thing I could come up with is the marinas in the fall take boats out and they do a lot of hull washing. And I don't know in the past when we have had water bans in the past.
Yes.
And I don't know that anybody's asked any questions. people have just kind of gone about whatever their activities are from a business perspective, and we are not a business-heavy community. So I'm assuming that people just did what they normally did, and there isn't a lot of change that I see for most of our industry or business from greater water use in the winter, with the exception of boat washing, which I know can be a lot, but for all I know, they're pumping out seawater, because I don't think they care whether it's fresh water or seawater, although fresh water works better with soap, but,
I think they do care when you're flushing your engine though, so.
yes, that's
right, so,
correct. That would be correct, they're hooking up, for
Um,
sure.
To Ann's point though, the gentleman who runs an auto detailing business, he comes to people's homes and he uses their water supply.
Okay,
So he has been out of commission for that part of his business, and he is probably, there may be another, similar business that comes to town, and they're looking for a way to continue their business. Personally, I would like to see them be able to apply for a waiver, because I don't think it was any of our intention to halt businesses from operating. And, given the information that was in our package about where the heavy use is coming from, I don't think it's from, the car detailing businesses, and we ought to let that, those types of businesses apply for a waiver to the DPW and have an adjudication process. That's what I would like to see myself.
Yeah, I think that we have to be business friendly.
Right.
And I think that one of the big businesses in town is boating, all right? And that going out of the water, we have to be able to, people got a lot of money invested. And I don't want to be the one that's going to say, no, you can't do what you normally do for end of season work. Plus, as we get later into the season, there won't be any need for watering or, I don't have a problem with all of those industries and other industries. I don't know what, I can't think of anything else that comes to mind. I didn't even think about boating, but yes, that's huge.
no, that's a big volume
Yeah.
water
I think I don't have a
consumer,
problem
very
with
narrow period of time,
Yeah.
1
It's a
month.
very narrow period of time. I
But-
don't have a problem with that at
Yeah.
all.
So the car detailing, is that something that came to town hall, or came to our attention somehow, or?
It hasn't actually come to town hall, I think it's maybe come to a couple of you.
Okay.
Social media came.
Social
he was-
media.
He was asking a question.
I'm not
am I
on.
allowed to, et cetera.
I'm not on, but a fair question
Yeah.
on his part, so. Yeah, no, I agree, we should probably provide for some, I just don't, I don't think it's gonna be a large quantity that we're dealing with.
And we're not hurting like other local community, other area, right? I mean, I was reading where even Gloucester's talking about banning hand watering.
They have done that.
They have,
Something
other
like that.
communities
But-
have a
but
very
we're-
strict ban.
We're basically, and we've cut, 30% of our water usage. I don't have a problem at all of helping small business out.
So can I get a motion to allow businesses to apply to DPW for a waiver from the water ban, provided that they can convince the DPW that their use is critical and well monitored?
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Sons.
Approved.
Ms. Bowman.
Yes.
yes.
Ms. Harrison votes yes. We move on to committee.
I've got one more question
Okay, sure.
on a follow-up here. I assume that the DPW will have the process for that. They'll set up a process and review that. Just a question, Greg. Do we have any history of gravelly pond levels over the past, say, 4 or 5 years?
We do,
I'm sure we
yes.
do.
Yes, no, absolutely. We have more than 4 or 5 years. We have quite a track record.
I would kind of be interested in seeing what that is, say, over 5 years compared with what has been, I don't know, say a 10-year moving average, in other words, where that is. I'm just curious where bands have gone and where the, where the pond level is.
Right, so, so right now, we're just below 26 feet as marked on the
26 feet?
26 feet elevation
Oh,
on the monitoring well. It's not actually the actual elevation, it's, you add another 18 feet to get the actual elevation of what it is, but nonetheless, it's all relative to where it's gone. So right now, we're just below 26 feet, which is not that out of the ordinary for the multiple years. Last year was a very wet year. We were at
No, no, no.
29 feet, 29 and a half feet maybe.
These are the wells.
This is Gravelly Pond,
Okay.
as measured
the
at
depth.
the raw water intake
Okay,
location.
yeah.
A few years, I think I left that sheet downstairs, but anyways, I can give you that history.
I'd just be interested in seeing that and when bands were kind of introduced in those years. And I guess we have a band maybe every 3 years or so, or something, or 4 years.
Not even,
Not even?
not even.
Okay.
So if I can offer a suggestion, what might be helpful is some kind of just a one-page or a journey chart.
Yeah.
2020, we did this,
Right.
and 2021, we did, that way we can every year take a look and see, here's our history and.
Yeah, and again, I would, if you can superimpose, say, the 10-year moving average, or some long terms, so we know this low was much lower than what it normally would be for that time of year, given the past, say, 10 or 15-year average.
Right, and so like I say, right now, where we are at just
It's a
below
little low.
26 is not alarming.
No,
So
it's low, it's lower than whatever the moving average would be, but not,
it's lower than what it was last year.
Yeah.
Last year was a wet year. It's pretty, it mimics a few other years that were not drought years. Just because of the high usage that we have in summer.
okay, good. Well, I'd be interested in seeing that, I'm not sure who can put that together.
Yeah, no, it's
Somebody-
very easy to do from.
Yes, from the historical data, that'd be great.
They'll have that.
Any other drought-related? Okay. The committee reappointments, which are Animal Control Board for a 3-year term and Historical Committee for a 3-year term. Carrie Bisner and John Round. Mr. Round, are you prepared to accept me?
Yes, I will say a caveat with that. I've been on that committee for quite a few years, I think probably about 5 or 6.
Mhm.
The committee needs another person. If they can find another person, I may step down. I am on that committee right now because I am the representative from the Manchester Historical Museum.
Mhm.
And I could probably get someone to take my place there, but the committee has a bigger issue in that it needs more people.
Mhm.
So I'll stay there for the present. I can probably get someone else, maybe 2 people. If I get 2 folks, then I may step down. But right now, yes, I am prepared to deal with that. It is not a big time consuming.
John, is that a voting position or you as an alternate?
No, it's a voting position. There are 7 people normally. There have been 6 now for probably about 4 or 5 months. And we're looking for a 7th. And that 7th, unfortunately, is a very hard slot to fill. It's an architect.
Oh, okay.
And doesn't have to be, but that's
That's the slot.
that's the slot that is open. And architects are very hard to get on that group because when they sign on to that committee, they can no longer do any architectural work within the historic district. So you need an architect who's maybe a corporate person from Boston who is not practicing. And that's a challenge.
Does anyone want to speak to the Animal Control Board?
My understanding, this is the only person on the board right now? Is that?
Yeah, we definitely need more volunteers for animal control.
Is
It's-
that something that perhaps we need to be, like a real call for help, maybe through the Tide or social media or something, the cricket, and with perhaps a brief description of the duties of that board, which
I would like to know what
Members.
those duties are.
I'm not familiar with, including myself.
There's 2 of us now.
There's at least 2 of us.
Yeah, it's just like Sally Curry moved about a year ago
Mhm.
to New Hampshire. So I know that she's no longer there.
So we certainly can do that. You know, it never hurts to do some personal recruiting. So if you know of people who are looking to volunteer. or-
I wouldn't even know what to
Yeah, we can give you
tell
some-
them. Yeah, if
yeah.
you give us the
We can give
talking
you a little-
points and,
A brief description.
yeah,
sure.
that would be really,
Do I have, is there a motion for reappointments?
So moved.
reappointing, Carrie Bisner and John Round to their respective committees.
Absolutely.
Second.
All in favor? John?
Well, I'm not sure I can vote for me, and that was a collective.
It was a collective, okay.
John, yes. So two votes?
2 votes, sure.
Yes to both.
Yes to both.
Yes to both.
Yes to Kerry.
Thank you. We now have 7 minutes until the Water Resources Protection Task Force gives us their update. Greg, is there anything from the consent agenda? Is there anything that anyone wants to take out of the consent agenda? I think in the August 15th minutes, the Boston Post can should be the Boston Post can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Deborah.
And it is,
The E is silent.
can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second,
Mr. Solacey,
yes.
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison votes yes. Oh, that didn't take enough time.
Well, I would like to elaborate a little bit perhaps on the Boston Post cane, because we have to
Yes.
schedule some
Or
things.
can.
Okay, yes.
So this is Alice Nahadas, who lives in School Street, and she would like that award done at home. You probably saw that email. And I would suggest that we try and do it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, whatever will work with her this coming week, in advance enough so that an article can go into the Cricket. When is the Cricket closing? Like
Tuesday.
noon, Tuesday, or
9
Tuesday sometime?
on Tuesday?
You know, if you're in the good graces of Erica, you can usually get a little leeway, but
Well, Erica's quite aware of what's going on here, and she wants a photo for all of that. And we also need, or they have requested, and I think it makes good sense to put together a proclamation.
Yes.
It would also go in the Cricket, I think, or perhaps get published in that, I don't know. Is that something, Greg, that we would also get published there, or is that just a
we certainly can.
Okay,
What is the procedure for producing a proclamation? Do
good
we
question.
have to have it and vote on it, or?
Well, it would be helpful to have you just vote now that you would, in addition to awarding the cane, you would also sign a proclamation honoring.
For her on, actually September 17th, when she turns
Right.
100.
So you could also approve declaring September 17th
Okay,
Alice Nahadas Day.
and you have standard wording for a proclamation?
Yes.
I assume you do. You can
Right.
probably
Right.
fill in the blanks.
So we could produce that, you can sign it and have it ready for the 17th.
Sounds,
Okay, you were saying, I think, that you wanted it this coming weekend.
this coming, or early in the week.
To get into next week's cricket.
You have to get into the Cricket on the date of the 16th of September, which is a week from Friday,
Right.
and today is Wednesday.
So it would be next Tuesday, which is the 13th, or Tuesday morning.
We would need to get it,
Do we want to have the award before then, or do we want?
I think the award would be on or before that day.
We're meeting on the 12th already at 4.
Can we have that?
Oh,
Can
That's
everybody
right,
sign
good
in?
idea.
that's a good idea.
I think there's another meeting on the evening of the 12th, but perhaps we could meet a little bit earlier
That's a good idea.
on the 12th and sign it and then present it.
I can check with Alice. I think that she should be pretty flexible with all of that, and if we could say, I don't know, 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, And if Erica can live with that, I mean, all the copy would be done.
The 12th is a Monday.
Excuse me, the 12th is the month. Is that when we're meeting? The 12th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yay.
I'm sorry, we're cutting way into your business day.
Well, yeah, and then no worries at this point.
I can do my best to make it. I do have an appointment.
I can do 4 o'clock for the regular meeting. I might not make it to, I mean,
Yeah, I can do the regular meeting. I'm not sure I can get back by 3, but I'll do my best.
Right. Okay.
So if we have the proclamation and get it signed sometime,
I can get it signed in advance. I can
Yeah.
certainly do
Right,
that.
I mean,
Right, so we'll produce it tomorrow, and if you can
I can swing
swing
by.
by
Yep.
That'd be
between
awesome.
now and Monday afternoon.
Yeah.
Then we'll be
and,
ready.
and those of us who are available,
I think her address is I'll confirm with everybody.
it's
47.
the former Fresh ambassador.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah,
It's
it's that big house, right?
big house,
Okay.
right across from
Church.
the church and Front Street.
Okay. Good. So I can get in touch with them
Get in
right
touch
away
with them and get in touch with the
and
rest of
say
us,
that's
and
the time and
we'll arrange
we
to.
can all do there. That'd be great.
Super.
So if it's okay with you, I think we would just note that in the consent agenda under approving the award of the cane to her, that you also are approving a proclamation.
Yes.
If that's agreeable to everybody.
I will take care of, I gotta get the cane.
So
From the
you
museum.
want to amend the approval of the consent agenda with the note that we agreed to proclaim September 17th Alice Nanhada's Day.
Yes.
Mhm.
I think you made the,
Yes,
So-
I do accept that amendment.
and you seconded.
Great.
If you can't get the cane, John, Dr. Debbie should get you a can.
The annual award of the can.
You think that might be ready by 1 PM tomorrow? The proclamation?
Sure.
I mean, I'm trying to squeeze it in tomorrow afternoon because I
Yeah.
don't know that I can get to it on Monday and you're closed on Friday, so.
Well, will you be here?
I'll be here
I
Friday
think
morning.
it is.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Side door.
sometime, okay. Just let me know when it's ready, how's that?
We have 4 some whereas.
Shall we wait or shall we ask if the Water Resource Protection Task Force would like to start a minute early?
I think that's fine.
Yes.
Okay, this is getting in the list.
There he is.
Okay.
Good evening. I have 2 matters for your attention tonight. The first is a proposal with some urgency attached to it, which has been approved unanimously by the task force and comes to you for approval of the content and the expenditure. And second is a review of the interim findings of an analysis of water usage by account, focusing on residential accounts. Would you like to take those in that order or not?
That order would be. Yes,
Fine.
please, that order.
And should I assume you've had a chance to read the proposal, or shall I take you through it?
I've read it.
I've read it.
Read it.
Totally understand it.
Okay, so you understand that there are 3 phases being proposed for a total cost of $11,130, that it comes from our prime contractor, Scott Horsley, and his network colleague, Dana Truslow. And it's something which, as a team, they have done many times before. Let me also tell you that the bigger purpose, taking a step back from this, we need to understand how groundwater fills Gravelly Pond and supplies the wells in Round Pond that we pump into Gravelly. We understand the watershed fairly well, surface water characteristics, and there's not a great deal of surface water flow into Gravelly. So it is, as people say, spring fed. But the question of where that groundwater comes in is important for two purposes. One is to figure out whether we should recommend new groundwater protection districts, which was a question left open in the 1990 report by Horsley Witten. And secondly, to measure the magnitude of the risk of polluted groundwater. There are some significant sources of pollutants nearby in the two capped landfills from the town of Hamilton and our own. And there may be others. So that's the reason for doing this kind of work. The urgency, you may already know, has to do with the fact that right now the water temperature of Gravelly Pond is significantly higher than the groundwater, which doesn't change temperature very much and runs around 50 to 55 degrees. So it's an ideal time, either now or in the depth of winter before freezing. This is the ideal time to see from just thermal measurement where it is likely that groundwater is entering Gravelly Pond, and then to do some probes into that groundwater to measure water quality. We have picked a date to do this, or the contractors, I should say, have picked September 14th as the ideal date. And now I'm going to pause for a moment and let the commuter rail go past my office. Thank you. I think I should probably stop there and ask for questions.
Just have a question, Steve, if I could. In terms of the groundwater, obviously that can be fairly deep, and this talks about fairly shallow probing. So I'm just trying to understand how we get to those deeper sources.
Good question. I'm not sure on the authority to make the answer, but my understanding is that the structure of the soil and the outcroppings there make Scott and Dana quite confident that they'll be able to get meaningful groundwater measurements pretty close to the surface. As your question implies, there's also groundwater that runs through bedrock and fractures and such, and that is considerably more difficult to get to and to measure. But that's the reason to take a first cut at this, to determine whether by these measurements alone they can account for most of the regular filling, the productivity of the pond and the wells. And to the extent they can't, then the thermal imaging that's proposed with a drone, which would be done at the next cycle, which would be just before freeze over in December or January, will be the next step in getting information. And I think deep wells for testing or for going through bedrock would be the third and hopefully unnecessary alternative.
I noticed that Nate DeRosa is on, and he's part of the engineering team that handles our water. May I ask him his evaluation of this?
I think they're in favor of it, but Nate can speak for himself and Chuck.
Yeah, so we actually had a call with Dana and Scott today to review kind of the logistics for their site visit. We reviewed the proposal. I think it's worthwhile going forward. This, phase of it is really trying to locate our groundwater sources, so it's going to enable us doing the thermal imaging and later in the year will help us identify because where the actual groundwater is coming from, and then that will direct our future investigations to really tell us where exactly the groundwater sources are coming into the pond. So this is just the first phase of trying to help us narrow down for the later phase in December timeframe.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any other questions?
No.
Does anyone else have any other questions? I'm looking for a motion to approve the proposal from Herzog Consulting.
So moved.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Rand?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson says yes. Steve, you're up for the next one.
Yeah, money, Steve.
Thank you. The next subject is our initial study of drinking water usage by account. And I think you have already received and maybe had a chance to look at these PowerPoint slides. But let me put them on the screen. Here we go. May I share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to, Steve. I just gave you that permission.
Thank you. Done. It's important to read the title fully. We really are standing on Eli's shoulders here because he did what turns out to be the seminal piece of analysis a few years ago. And it's also important to give a fair amount of credit to DPW and the water department because we have exceptionally good account level, meter level data. And I know this is not the norm because I've spoken to a lot of other, number of other communities, some of which are laboring without accurate data, antiquated billing systems, difficulty accumulating databases, lost information, et cetera. So we're not just privileged by our supply of water, we're privileged by our data. Eli came up with 3 fundamental findings. First was that we, the residents, and it's important to say that this is residential, not commercial, on average, use more water per capita than other communities by a large margin. Second, that we have a strong seasonal difference with significantly more water use in the summer. And third, that there's a strong skew in the data with water usage concentrated in a relatively small number, or a small fraction of the residential users. And our goal in this interim was to update these findings, improve a little bit the quality of the database that Eli used, and then use it to start building a model. I'm going to pause for just a second, if you'll permit me to make a comment about commercial users who aren't reflected in here, although there's a little bit of overlap through landlords, commercial businesses that supply residential housing. But pure commercial users, I just wanted to note that one of the marinas, Manchester Marine, is, at least for the last 6 years, among the top 5 users, including residential. And I haven't investigated, I don't know whether that's primarily washing hulls in the fall or other purposes, but you might well ask if and when they apply for an exemption, that they take some steps to conserve water, reuse water, utilize salt water where possible, et cetera, because their usage is so outstanding. I'd also ask whether you, as commercial, as businesses, you intend to include the Essex County Club, which is another relatively large user, and commercial landlords, such as the property owner for Crosby's, which is also a large user. Just questions for your consideration as you interpret and ask DPW to administer what you just voted on. Okay, back to the residential side. The caveat here is that we're trying to analyze facts, not point fingers, cast blame. It turns out, the bottom line here is that everybody can pitch in and has to pitch in if we're going to have meaningful conservation. So the three conclusions are still true. We use far more drinking water per capita than any of our neighboring towns, and we're among the top 10 heaviest users among 287 Massachusetts towns and cities. This is measured in gallons per capita per day. And we stand out because we're above what the state sets as a standard maximum usage. It's not enforced with any rules that I know of, but it's set at 65 gallons. Now, just a note here, an important note, which is anytime I use an average here, it conceals an enormous range. So the bottom half of residential accounts average 26 gallons per person per day. The top half average about 4 to 5 times that, 126 gallons per capita per day. In addition to the amount we drink, we also have 25% of our water unaccounted for, which is about twice the average of neighboring towns. It's far above the state's standard maximum, which is 10%, and it's very much a concern of Chuck and Nate and the water department team. Unfortunately, in this respect, we're also among the worst performing. Combine these two, and we're clearly up in the top 10 in terms of using water per person in Massachusetts. The second one is also true. Water usage differs greatly from season to season. Our summer drinking water usage is 2.12 times, 212% of our winter usage. And this is the biggest summer bump in our area, and it puts us, again, in the top 10 or 20 in terms of ratio of summer to winter. The third one, that there's a skew. Eli was right in direction, although I think he was using meter level data, which is complicated because some households, some residences have multiple meters, many in fact. So when we combine those into single account usage by address, we find that 16 or 70% of accounts consume 50% of the drinking water. And these ratios of skew and concentration are remarkably consistent year to year for the past 10 years. Put point 2 and point 3 together, as Eli did, what I call the summer bump is also significantly skewed. The very biggest drinking water accounts use about 4 times as much in the summer as in winter. The bottom half of accounts use only 1.6 times. And taken together, these findings point toward how we can model different conservation steps, some that would be more widespread, some that would be more focused, some that would emphasize carrots, incentives, others that would emphasize sticks or penalties. All of that stuff is under consideration at the task force right now. What follows is a detail of this, and I'm happy to take you through that. I'm also happy to stop right here and let you ask questions, and that may guide us to what part of the analysis is most interesting to you or where you have questions. What would you like?
I have questions. Thank you, Steve. I have a couple of questions. Number one, maybe this is a question for Nate as opposed to Steve, I'm not sure, but what are we doing right now to account for the missing water? You know, that seems like a task we should just go do and maybe doesn't need to be under the purview of this task force. It's just an operational quality issue as far as I'm concerned. It's something we shouldn't necessarily need to wait for a recommendation. So I'm just trying to understand, what are we doing right now? And does the team need help with anything? That's one of my questions.
Procedural, could we ask Steve to take down that slide, to not share his screen and while we have a discussion? Thank you.
He just did. So I'll jump in quickly and Nate can fill in more details. So as high as that unaccounted for number currently is, it was a lot higher, half a dozen years ago. And so the efforts to replace pipe or reline pipes have reduced the amount of leakage in the system. So we've already made significant gains, and we'll continue to make gains as we continue to replace old pipe. The other piece I think that both Nate and Chuck are particularly interested in and are hopeful that it'll bring down that number is replacing the old original meters. So by getting new meters that are hopefully more accurate, we could find that it's a bit of a myth in terms of our unaccounted for water because it could be just inaccurate meters.
Okay, so those are two things, right?
Are they the home meters or the meters at the water plant?
Well, the both. The meters at home have been replaced. They're not as old as the meters at the plant. The meters at the plant are quite large and expensive, but they are slated to be replaced.
So along those lines, there are some things.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead, Nate.
Sure.
Sorry. So we did replace the effluent meters at the water treatment plant this last year. So we did replace those. So we should have much more accurate readings coming out of the plant now. So that was kind of our first step in that we know exactly what we're producing at the plant. But it is true that our residential meters, all the in-house meters are like 20 plus years old. And, you know, over time, like anything, you lose at the accuracy of those meters. You know, we can pull them and we have done some testing, you know, but it is, you know, they show signs of, you know, losing accuracy.
So I guess I don't want to get into a solutioning here so much as I think this is an operational issue. And number one, and I'm just not sure it's under the purview of water protection, because we're asked, you know, it seems like there's a job here we have to go do as a town operation, and I'd like to, but it feels like we are not sure that we've identified all of the causes of the leakage, or I'm not hearing confidence that we have. So I'd like to better understand this part of what we're discussing today, and I don't think it needs to be done under the umbrella.
18 months.
Yeah.
I think the task force has identified something important,
Exactly.
and that I believe that I asked Chuck, and yes, he's very aware of that. And as Greg said, it used to be worse. I haven't seen numbers on how much worse
Right,
it was, but
We were up over 40%.
Right, so so I would expect to see some type of chart that shows here's where we were, here's what we've improved. Based on the timing of these additional pipe replacements, we expect to be down here, okay? I would expect to see that, and then we can assess whether or not our prediction was correct, right? And if not, we need to go hunt for other causes. So just, once again, I just feel like the task force has identified something very critical, but I'm not sure if we need them to follow up on that
Madam
particular
Chair,
piece.
if I may,
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, certainly.
Please.
these are very good points, and I suspect I'm just repeating what Chuck and Nate have taught the task force, including me. But there are a couple of other potential sources of unaccounted for water. One is leakage in the branch lines, which are privately owned by residents and connect them to the main or leak in their homes. The really exceptional ones of those get flagged because somebody suddenly sees a bill that's 10 times higher than they expect. But the slower, smaller ones don't. And the other, which may overlap some of our work, is that when Branch lines were originally put into some of the larger properties, maybe all of the larger properties in Manchester. Significantly larger branches were used. Most residences have a 1-inch branch. These would use a 4-inch branch, and that's because those branches subdivided out to different parts of the property, like the main house, the carriage house, the gardener's area for irrigation, the pool house, etc. And it isn't clear that all of those sub-branches have meters. Chuck has said, typically, back in the day, it was normal to put a meter, in the basement of the main house. So it's possible that some of that usage is unintentionally unmetered at the residential level. Does that help?
Yes, I mean, another great finding, I think that, once again, I think it would be nice for the board to have a summary that, we don't have to wait for the task force to do its work. We may need to help the DPW during the budget planning season, and if so, the sooner we understand, the better, I guess.
I'd like to ask Nate a question if I can. And I get the feeling that this 25% is a moving target. We were at 40% some point. We're now at 25%, or maybe that's not today. Maybe that's, say, what it was in 2020 or 2019. That number is continuing to get smaller. I mean, maybe it's even smaller with all of the school street pipes now being substituted with, we know, pipes that work. And then when we go back to the newly installed pipes, that improvement will continue. So is this 25% that we're working with, Nate, is that kind of over some short period of time? And I mean, today, as we speak, we may be even at 15 or 20%. Where's this 25% coming from?
So it comes from our annual statistical report that we have to fill out every year for the DEP. So we basically go through and we have a total water produced, and we know that from the meters that we have at the finished water at the plant. So basically we start there. We know how much water we've produced and put into the system. Then we use all of our meter readings, residential, commercial, our municipal, and anything else in town. And so we know how much water we've got there. Then we have other unaccounted for water. So like when we do our hydrant flushing, when we have any breaks, we have to estimate how much water we've used in those scenarios. So if we have a break, like we had one out at the end of Bridge Street past Jersey Lane, when we dug down to the main, it was Swiss cheese. It was, not in good condition, and it's hard to say how long that leak had been going on, and it's very hard for us to estimate, how much water we're losing per day there. So, we work with our treatment plant operators, who know how much water we're producing on the daily, and we can sometimes, narrow down, it looks like we might have had a spike there, or, something to try to give us a guesstimate of, how much these breaks are causing. And then things like hydrant flushing, when we're doing our twice annual hydrant flushing, that goes into it. So it's a lot of different, aspects that we, there's a lot of water use that unfortunately isn't directly metered and has to be estimated. So depending, from year to year, how good those estimates are, can kind of sway those by a few points. So I would say over the last few years, we've been making the improvements on the streets that need it. Anything that's been in the sea, Raymond Street, Ocean Street, those mains were not in good condition, and those are in the saline environments that are corroding our cast iron pipe. So it's making, it's kind of the trend line over the longer term, like Greg said, where we were up over 40%, and having done those, mains and on the streets that are by the ocean, we're addressing those bigger issues, and we're seeing it go down over time. And I think having, like Steve was saying, one of our suspicions is that many of these estates have made potentially unmetered, but there are also a lot of old cast iron mains, so they potentially have the same types of leaks that our water mains are seeing. So it's very hard for us to put a number on those types and pinpoint it. We can do leak detection, and we do that at least once a year, where we have a consultant come out and basically they can hook on to the valves and hydrants and listen to the flow of water, and they come out in the middle of the night when presumably there's not large usage, and if they hear something that sounds like more than standard residential usage at 2 o'clock in the morning, that can help locate, and that's how we found this leak on Bridge Street. So it is a little bit of it's unfortunately not something we can define, and it is a little bit of a guess and check in that regard. But we can target the areas that we know are more than likely to have these issues.
So, a quick question, the 25% then is in a report from what year? To the Department of Public Works, you said, or?
Yeah, that's the 2021, and that's actually on the DPW website.
And
Yep.
if you were to look at a trend line, when you filed in 2020 and 2019 and 2018, is that number continuing to move?
Yeah, so I think Steve actually had it up on his presentation, the last slide. I think we were kind of ranging. We were 2018, we were a bit lower. I think that was, I don't know if that was the first year we did it or not, but so we seem to be going up slightly now, but
Yeah.
That doesn't show the 2021 number.
Okay, yep, there we go.
And another question for you, Nate. Are the meters generally in houses or at the street? That is, are you measuring it as it goes into the branch or at the end of the branch?
The vast majority of residential meters are, in the house. So as the service comes up into the basement, there will be a shutoff valve, and then directly after the shutoff valve is the meter. There are a small number, it's generally limited to more of the estates or, properties that have, we'll say, multiple connections off of a single service. They'll have a meter pit, somewhere potentially in the driveway, in the yard, where the service comes in. There's a meter, generally obviously below frost line. Then that continues, that could branch off and go to multiple residences type thing.
Just for context, we did comparisons in this initial work of Manchester versus our neighbors, and this, in the words of the task force from August 24th meeting, this isn't the picture of Manchester that we want to be giving to the state, to our neighbors, to our grandchildren, et cetera, and having our nearest neighbor, Essex, reporting a remarkable 5.5% average unaccounted for, which baffles me, but it's what DEP told us.
Some of that may be how many miles of pipe you have, and how old the
Yeah.
pipe is.
Yep, and in Gloucester's case, there is a major twice-a-year switchover from one water system to another, and a lot of water is dumped and lost at that point. So there are, anecdotal or idiosyncratic reasons for some of these results. Hopefully, there are for ours as well, and we can rectify that. But I would say these kinds of comparisons with the state standard on any of these elements, per capita usage, the only town of the nearby towns or water districts that are above the state norm, maximum, well, et cetera. I don't want to belabor this point, but this isn't the town I want to be proud of.
Are there other questions from the board?
I have one more question, Steve. On your slide, I guess 29, just a kind of an interpretation, if you put slide 29 up there. Your pie charts.
Yep, I got it.
Yes, I think that's the one. This is kind of a summer versus winter comparison. And
Go ahead.
when you've got winter consumption, which is in nearly all cases is less than summer, I'm assuming that your winter consumption is kind of your core consumption. This is what you're using in the household. And summer is what you're doing, and maybe you've got an awfully big lawn and you're irrigating that. But your summer consumption would include also your household consumption during the summer.
Correct.
So for example, in the upper right, which are the big consumers, in the summer, it's 33, million gallons, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
6 million of that is probably your household consumption, so 27 goes to irrigation.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so if I go to the center line, the cell to the left, the one where it has the most households, 725 households, 13 is in the winter and 16 is in the summer. So that is to say, they're only consuming 3 million more gallons. Even though it's a lot of people, they're only consuming 3 million more gallons in the summer than they are in the winter.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly right.
That leads to the question of the lower right.
these people left
Where-
town in the summer.
Yeah, the exception here would be what Ann, I think what Ann is pointing to, which is houses that are unoccupied in the
Yeah.
winter.
Um,
I don't know who that is.
Well, me in August, but I don't think it's that big. Are you sure these aren't percentages?
No, these are million gallons per year. In each, they total up to around 140, 150 million gallons.
I'd really like to
usage.
know how somebody cuts his water use in half.
Well,
So I only look at that, I needed to get that interpretation, because when you look to say, where can we save gallons on irrigation, you have to look at where the pie chart is mostly skewed to summer use. Because your regular household use, which doesn't change very much around the clock, I don't think, is taking up a percentage of that.
mhm.
So even though there are an awful lot of people in that left-hand center pie, there aren't a lot of extra gallons that are being consumed
Yeah,
Yes.
that's fair.
in the summer.
That's fair. The rates of consumption, even in the winter, for some of the houses toward the right-hand side of this, some of the households to the right-hand side of this table are much, much higher than the median. And it's possible they take a whole lot more showers or cook a lot more, boil a lot more pasta, or I don't know what, but it's more likely that they're just heavy water users, perhaps indoor gardens, other uses. It's a bit of a riddle why winter usage per capita would be so high in this right-hand column, so much higher than winter usage per capita is in this. Because that's basically, as you were saying, it's basically human use for cooking, cleaning, bathroom use.
Would this also include housing units that there are multiple units on 1 meter?
Yes, it
So-
does, but those are pretty minor. They're what I would call a rounding error in these calculations. Yeah, they're the one exception to the clean cut between residential and commercial. If they're truly residential, they should not be charged as a single meter because they're multiple residences. If they're really commercial, then we should treat them as such.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have just one more request or comment. On your last slide where it says next steps, a request, they look like great next steps, by the way. I hope that the team has learned enough that they could put together a timeline for what you intend to do over the remaining
Yeah.
months. And
Yeah.
it would be
We are
helpful.
about 2/3 of the way through that. It was an excellent suggestion. I think it came from you, Kathy, at the last update we presented. It is a little bit like pulling teeth to get volunteers to do a work plan and a timeline that we can
Right.
combine.
So the
But
reason
we're almost there.
that's fine, even if it's imperfect, I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And
Amen.
the reason I keep pushing on it is if you could bring back to the board what you have, and I believe it should include any decision-making points, right, that the board may have on their calendar, on our calendar, right? So if we have to set new rates for next year and we do it in, is it July or August?
Typically set the rates in July.
July, okay, so that would be one item on the timeline. And then that would mean we would want the team to come back with a recommendation, a month early, if there was some dramatic change, right? So that's why the timeline is so important, because it includes our tasks, not just yours. And so I think it would be really helpful if we could take a look at what you have. Like I said, it's, we just don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good.
Right. Well, this is far from perfect and incomplete to boot. So we have 1, 2, 3 of the 6 teams reporting in so far with task level detail and some targets for completion. And from that, we were going to come and recommend when you might allow us a bit more time so you can hear the recommendations and begin to make decisions. But as I said, certainly by the end of the month, we will have this done and reviewed in our next meeting.
Excellent.
Okay.
Any other questions?
And that's all I have for you tonight.
Is there anyone, who is following us on Zoom who has a comment to add? Seeing no hands? Thank
Let
you
me
very
just
much, Steve.
Add, as a way of closing, my deep thanks to the now 24 people who are really pitching in to get this task force work done. I'm impressed and grateful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Now, the next item is the continuation of the traffic calming. And we got, flip through here, we got some reports from the police chief, and Greg, are you going to start discussing this, or would you like Todd?
Well, I'll do a quick intro, and then I'll let Todd go into more detail and answer questions that you might have. So I believe we have 15 or so data sheets that reflect the 15 different counts on different roads, each being basically a week long. And most of, all but 2 show low incidence of speeding.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's a range, but this is a summary of the data that we obtained from the counters.
Mhm.
And with that, I would have you ask questions of Todd, perhaps.
Does anyone on board want to start?
Yeah, I just had a question. Yeah, Todd's there. I'm trying to interpret all of these sheets, Todd, and high versus medium versus low. I assume there are cutoffs there and percentages that determine what's high versus medium versus low. You there?
Yep, yeah, sorry, you are correct on that, yes.
Can you tell me what those are, that enforcement rating?
Well, the enforcement ratings is, high would be, I think it's 15 over, and low would be 10 plus.
10 plus or 10 or less?
Or, yeah, excuse me, 10 or less, yes.
Less than, and that's percentage.
Correct, yep.
And what's
That's
medium?
miles per hour over the speed limit.
Okay, so greater than 15% is high, less than
Yep.
10% is low, and 10 to 15 is medium.
Correct, yep.
I thought he said 15 miles per hour.
Was that
but-
15
Yeah,
miles
it-
per?
Yes, 15 miles per hour.
So the problem areas are Pine Street and Upper School. based
Correct,
on-
yep.
Right,
That's what.
I don't
yep.
think anyone's surprised by that. And all of Pine Street, not just Upper Pine.
Well, where we took the data from was Lower Pine, I believe, in the area of Newport Park.
Okay.
So that speed limit is 20,
Mhm.
which should be 20 from Woodhome to the center of town.
Okay, your chart says that that spot was at 25 mile an hour zone, but
Yeah, that was probably before the speed limits were switched.
okay.
Excuse me, Todd, how did we decide on 20 miles an hour?
The 20 mile an hour was considered a safety zone, and that's because Newport Park is in that area. And to consider it a safety zone, it's either a school, an elderly housing, a church, a playground, or something where the public has a lot of foot traffic or access to.
And that's the same for Upper School Street as well?
Yeah, because that's considered in the district of the school, the high school, and also it's got the preschool and the churches on School Street.
And what was the reason for the 20 mile per hour start at around the cemetery as you come from Upper Pine down to Lower Pine?
Because I think we decided when we did the assessment, it had to be within a quarter mile of where the location of the building was.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Does any of this, how does this correlate with the questions or concerns that you field, which you said I think are a couple a week or something like that? Is there any correlation?
I mean, yeah, there is. We had a complaint this week about School Street traffic, and we added some extra radar patrols up there. Matter of fact, starting today. And, I mean, we get complaints all over town, and we address them as best we can with the personnel that we have.
Right, I'm just curious whether, because most of your stuff comes up low.
Yeah, no, it does.
So
yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's a correlation. There's only one that's high, and I don't know if you have people in the Pine Street area that are saying, hey, this is a problem for us.
Yeah, mostly the complaints on Pine Street are usually from Lower Pine, in the 20 mile an hour area. But if we get a complaint, we put the tubes out there or the box on the pole, and we assess the situation. A lot of complaints from Pleasant Street, because that's usually a cut through, especially during school time. And we put the pole camera or the pole box out there, and it just indicates that it's not exactly what people are thinking. However, we'd like to stop all the speeding, but it's it's difficult to be in every place at once.
Yeah, I was surprised with the Pleasant Street data.
Yeah.
Because you've spoken about that before.
And the Pleasant Street data is consistent with the ones that we've done prior too. So we did it on two separate occasions, because one of the complaints that we heard when we did it, there was construction, it slowed vehicles down, and then we did it again, and it pretty much was the same.
I understand that the 10 mile an hour enforcement tolerance is because when people take tickets to court and contest them, they argue that the measurement is inaccurate, and if you have a 10 mile an hour over the speed limit, it's easier for people to believe, for the court to assume that there's, even if there's some maladjustment, that there's in fact a problem. On the other hand, if I follow the police reports in the Gloucester Times and the Cricket. We give a vastly more warnings and, written and verbal warnings than we do tickets in town. It seems as if we should be using that level of enforcement to say a warning that doesn't require going to court, to enforce these speed limits at the posted limit rather than at 10 miles an hour over the posted limit, particularly if the posted limit is 20 or 25 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, that's the industry standard across the state. I've spoken to the courts about this, and, they seem to feel that that's a reasonable thing that we're doing. Most of the people that we stop are people who have never had an encounter with the police in the past. And what happens is we'll stop them, we'll check their driver history, they'll check their in-house history. If they never had a ticket, then they get a written warning. If it's an egregious event, I'd say more than 15 or more over. For instance, I had a gentleman the other day, I stopped myself. He was doing like 17 over in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and never had a ticket, but depending on the conditions of the road and what's going on, he got a citation. And also, it's difficult to take away the officer's discretion in certain incidents, and that's basically how we try and do these things. But I understand where you're coming from, but we do issue a fair number of violations when it's needed.
I think that an observer, a resident, who saw someone doing 30 in the 20-mile-an-hour zone might feel that was unacceptable, and it wouldn't show up on your numbers at all.
Hmm.
Anyone else?
So I guess my question is, we thank you for providing the data, because this is what we asked for. So that's step number one. So now we have the data, and the question is, what are we going to do about it? And I think last time we talked about possible, looking into possible technology options, because, you can't be everywhere. There's no way, but we do need to do something. I'll just say, before I came to this meeting, I was walking my dog 5:45 in the afternoon, and Lower Pine Street, somebody was headed toward the harbor, drove on the wrong side of the road to pass somebody right in front of my property. The one time I didn't have my camera, my phone with me, and I couldn't take a picture, I didn't have my glasses, couldn't see the license plate, but I was just dumbfounded. I mean, these are the two roads that, what your data shows us, Todd, is that the roads coming off the highway are the most problematic areas.
Yeah.
That's what my takeaway is. So my presumption is that a lot of these people may not be residents. I don't know what your data shows, but these are people using our town as a path through, may not care. Like you mentioned, residents might disagree with the 10 mile per hour. These people probably don't live here. They could be just passing through, and pretty quickly at that. So my question is, what are we going to do about it? And do you need help to look at some of these other options? What are other towns doing? I think the next step is, we have the data, but what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, I just say one thing. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but having worked here for so long, I think, in my opinion, I would say 85% of the people we're stopping are town residents.
Okay.
And then the other 15 is, you are right, is probably people passing through or people coming to work here. One of the times that we get a lot of complaints on those roads, like you said, people, roads come up, roads coming into town is in the early mornings when people are coming to work or people are going to work. So
Yep, that makes sense.
that's kind of the times that we like to hit on traffic enforcement.
That
so-
makes sense. Rush hour.
Rush hour, yeah.
Interest of rush hour.
So what we can do is we can put in, certain traffic measures or speed bumps. I know Chuck isn't really a proponent of speed bumps or speed humps as they call them. But, that's something we can look at. But the only thing, on the police side of things is we can do is really try and increase our enforcement, which I think we have because it shows in our arrest data that's over the last 6 or 7 months.
Excuse me, it sounded almost like a road rage kind of thing, someone passing, okay?
So somebody was driving the speed limit,
And
and there was I think that's a
is there
good way
any
of
value,
describing it.
and
Yeah.
this is, I don't know if this is counterproductive or counterintuitive, is raising the speed limit to 25. Okay? Might diminish some of the road rage issues, and it seems to be, it's almost, you actually have to pay attention, stare at your speedometer to hit that 20 miles an hour. And as I said, I'm not proud of this, but I've maybe got 1 or 2 smiley faces my entire time down Pine Street.
I think that's a valid point.
Okay,
I think that's a
and
valid
if we
point.
can, I think Lieutenant McCoy actually suggested this, is that maybe it is a road rage issue, and if we were to raise the speed limit, maybe that becomes almost a calming situation. I don't know what you feel about that, Chief.
Well, we got to remember that Lower Pine Street, years ago, was 30 miles an hour.
Right.
So
So,
it's
and it
25
was
to
lowered.
compromise.
It was lowered because of people were concerned about speed, and then the new local option laws that were enacted by the state, we were allowed to drop it to 20 because of the Newport Park housing area.
Do you
that-
feel comfortable going to 25? Would you feel comfortable going to 25?
Yes, I would feel comfortable going to 25. Yes.
What does the data tell us? 'Cause I think it's a valid point.
Well, but it's also, to Kathy's point, you're going 20 miles an hour and someone behind who's in a hurry, okay, who's coming down, remember, they're coming off of 128 for the most part, okay, so they've already got, speed racer in them. So, and then you come down, if it slows down to 25, you seem like you're moving a little quicker. I mean, I think that the parade probably is speeding down to Pine Street on the 4th of July at 20 miles an hour.
It's a valid option to look at, I think. I think it's a good suggestion. I would just ask, what does the data tell us? Because I'm pretty sure that we lowered the speed limit either in late 2017 or early 2018.
2019, I think it was.
Yeah, it was right around the time I moved here full-time, so, because I was one of those people that didn't realize it had changed and I got pulled over. So,
You ticketed?
I did, because I didn't know it had changed. I wasn't a full-time resident, I was a part-time resident, and so I didn't know to lower my speed by 5 miles per hour. So I guess what I'm saying is, what does the data tell us since we lowered it? Has it gotten worse? Is there that road rage aspect, or has it not gotten worse? Did it help us to lower it?
One of the biggest complaints since we lowered it was exactly what you said happened today. People passing each other.
Okay,
On a
that's
double
more
sidewalk.
dangerous to me,
Yeah.
what happened today.
Can we do a sample, like, can we, a temporary, is there something that we can do to then raise it 25 for, it's kind of like the roundabouts at the bottom of Pine Street. Can we try something for a 2-month period, a trial period, to see how that affects numbers? Or is that asking too much?
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever you guys decide, I mean, I'd be more than willing to, it's just changing the speed limit signs.
Todd, do you have data on Pine Street before it was lowered to 20 miles an hour?
No, I don't.
Data like this?
I'd have to go back and look. Whatever we have is on our website. I can check, but I'm not 100% sure we do.
So
I would be interested if you do. I'm just wondering, people drive down streets and most people drive at a speed that they feel this is what makes sense.
This is what's comfortable. on
Right,
this road.
regardless of what the number is there, they know they're not gonna be off by more than 5 or 10 miles an hour, but they drive at a speed that makes sense for wherever they're at.
Right.
And I'm wondering, I mean, if you were to change it from 20 to 25, I don't know if there's data would change much at all.
right.
Yeah,
So you'd have the same
so-
raw data, you'd just be
So-
ranking it differently.
So we do have it for 9/12 of 2016 to 9/21 of 2016, and the inbound average speed in the area of 66 Pine Street was 28.88 miles an hour, and the outbound average speed was 29.76. So the bi-directional average was 29.35.
A little lower than what this shows.
And right now, what is the average is
It's 32.
32.
Yeah.
So the speeding has gotten worse, if I'm understanding that correctly.
The speed limit is 5 miles an hour less,
Right.
And the
And the speed
speeds
went up.
have gone up.
Yeah.
That's what the data tells us.
like, because people are mad?
Can't judge.
Or is that just,
I
Well,
have to use
actually,
cruise
so the
control to
posted
keep
speed at
the
that time
speed.
was 35 miles an hour. So
oh,
I
it was
wrong.
35? 35?
35, yeah, that's what it said here on the data. Posted speed is 35.
I would like to see 25 for a trial and see
Yeah,
how that
I would-
works.
I can't argue with that. But I guess what I was
Okay,
that I think the town would, we may want to get some town input into this, I don't know.
but I think we want to get the fact that when the speed limit was
Yes.
higher.
Yep.
The speeds were lower.
That's right. We need some data, I mean, I think data on a chart showing the trend of what the speed limit was and what the speeds were. It sounds like you have the data, if someone could put it on a chart, because I do think
Yep.
we may want to get some
Yeah.
town input before we enact any changes, but I think it's worth looking at. I
So,
don't know.
so the industry standard in terms of traffic engineers, they'll tell you that you take the 85th percentile,
Right,
and that's what the speed should, because that's what everyone wants to drive it as you would
Right,
comment. John,
right,
that-
that's correct.
That the environment sort of dictates how quickly you drive on a particular stretch of road.
Right.
You know, so the 85th percentile on Pine is 37 miles an hour under this last study. So it indicates that the road is too wide for the speed that we want people to go.
Yeah, up there, as it gets down where you live, it gets narrower.
It does,
But-
but what happens is people turn from Central Street, they take a right onto Pine, and they put their foot on the accelerator big time. And you can hear it in the morning, like Chief Fitzgerald says, when it's a morning rush, you can hear it. I can hear it from my window.
Yeah,
But the condition of the road hasn't changed. What happened is we lowered the speed limit, and then the average speed, the 85th percentile, went up in absolute miles per hour, not in how much over.
Right, that may be some of that impatient factor.
Well, again, I
Right,
think
I
that
think it is.
we can address, that helps address the issue here of road rage,
So-
okay?
So how do we get to where you want to go?
Well, I just, we posted this discussion as a discussion,
Mhm.
that a decision would not be made. I didn't get that feeling. I feel that we need to bring back the information, the data nicely charted out, a one-pager, and post an agenda item saying that we would make a decision, one way or another, and give the
About
townspeople
speed limit
about the
on-
speed limit,
On
yeah,
Pine Street.
on Pine Street, and then give people an opportunity to weigh in.
Can we put a time frame as to when we want to make a decision?
Yeah, like our next meeting.
So we
Yeah.
get 2 weeks? Yeah.
I just
So-
feel like this, without public input,
Is
it's,
this something that the police department can put together in town?
Yeah, I mean,
Let's try to change the signs.
Lieutenant McCoy is in charge of this. I'm sure he's on the meeting. I mean, we can put a spreadsheet together that shows a graph of the stuff that we have. That's Pine Street is the 2016 study is the only other one we have, from what I can see going through
at the same place in Pine Street, or about?
About, yeah.
Yeah, 66 Pine Street.
Close
So
enough.
it's just,
Yeah.
yeah,
so,
close enough.
so I would suggest that's a good action. I would also suggest that since upper school is an issue, that we
Mhm.
just start collecting the data. I mean, it sounds like we don't have the same data.
We might, I just have to go back and look, but
Okay,
you
so
gotta
if
remember.
we have the same data for School Street,
Mhm.
present that as well.
Yeah.
And if we don't have data, I would like to see us start gathering it so we could make an intelligent decision of potentially about,
And if
School
I
Street
think-
as well.
And I think if we do change speed limits School Street should wait until we're done with construction anyway.
Right,
All
exactly.
right, so we do it incrementally.
So I have data from 2016 of School Street at Hidden Ledge, and
It's a long way from Atwater.
yeah, so we want it up further, and I know that Lieutenant McCoy just did one for School Street recently, so I probably about a year or so ago, or early this spring, so I know we have some data on Upper School Street. But the speed limit there should really be 40 miles an hour. That's the real speed limit.
That's
We
right.
changed it to 25 when we changed all the speed limits around back in 2019, and then it was decided it was too low, and it's gone back up to either, I think it's 35.
It goes to
now.
30, because it's 45 in Essex, you cross into Manchester, you gotta go to 35 right away, because I
35,
do it regularly, and then you go down to 25.
Right.
The 45 to 35, that's a hard stop.
Yeah, but,
Brake
yeah,
lights come on.
The actual posted speed for that road that's, I believe, recognized by the state is 40.
That would make a lot more sense,
But
but we don't have the data.
why don't we, would it make sense to focus, as Brian suggested, on Pine Street?
Yes.
Since School Street is currently going to be hard to judge.
I agree with lower school, but since upper school is unaffected by the
Yeah, that-
construction at
Okay.
all, if there's data to be collected and could be shown to us, I think we could make an independent decision on
And
that.
actually, to that point, no, you couldn't really expect any data, because people have to slow down because of what's
Right,
going on.
right.
with the,
I don't think we can do anything with lower school right now
you're not gonna
anyway.
get- You're not can't really collect any data there.
Right.
Until it's widened and
Yep.
so.
But upper school is unaffected.
So
When you say lower, this is this side of 128.
Correct.
So I do have data for Upper School Street at Atwater. So it's School Street at Atwater Ave, and we have a medium enforcement rating with the 86th percentile being 46 miles an hour.
Yep.
The average speed of 41.
Yep,
That makes sense.
We're looking at that.
Sometimes when I'm heading out Southern Ave, I have to look up and realize I have to speed up. You know, no,
Yes,
seriously.
it's
Okay, 'cause
kludgy, yeah.
Just where it is, you know, it's, as you point out, what's the environment allows for. And a nice leisurely 40 mile an hour, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, someone's behind me, or I gotta, you know, which is unusual for me.
Okay. So, if I understand, what we want is historic data for the two locations that are high and medium, preferably charted, so would we take that information and publicize it immediately, or do we want to wait until the next meeting to look at it and then publicize it?
I don't know, what do you guys think?
And that, you know, sooner
Feel better?
the better. We
Yeah.
can be kicking around traffic calming for a while now, so it's
So,
kicking in the butt.
We can do it next, the meeting the next meeting, we've got Harbor and, I don't know,
Planning,
Bunch of
the two
stuff.
big issues.
and planning board also?
Planning coming in.
Ooh,
So we're gonna do it for a month from now.
yeah,
That gives you plenty of time, and also figure out from Chuck how long it would take to actually make the
Change
changes.
the signs and
Change the
everything.
signs, once we made that decision. You will, is a month good?
yeah, I think that's.
so we
I think
want the
it's-
information, could we look at it briefly on the 12th? And just agree that that's what we want to put, what we want to publicize?
Can Todd put it together on the 12th?
If he can do it by then.
Yeah, I mean, between Mark and I, we'll be able to put something together on paper for you.
All right. I'm good with that.
Just to add one note, that the Pine Street data that we got back in 2016 was done with the tubes, and it was not done with the black box we use now, so they may be a little off. The tubes are usually a little more inaccurate than this machine we have now.
We'll go with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
We'll let the,
it's consistent anyway,
department
right?
be the enemy of the good.
Yeah. That's Kathy's model for
My
the
new,
day.
my new motto for today, yeah.
Okay, then I think we have a consensus of
Yep.
what we want to do and when we want to do it, so thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
good information.
But don't go away.
Nope, not going.
The next topic is, police and fire staffing discussion. And Greg,
Sure.
you are at the center of
Tee
that.
it up a bit here. Again, this is just an initial discussion and maybe some background information from both chiefs. Further discussion and decision-making as the FY24 budget process gets more underway. It'd be nice to make some decisions, certainly by late fall, so that we can plug that into the budget, preliminary budget proposals. Starting off with fire, on the short-term basis, we've had a retirement and a resignation, so that is making it difficult to maintain the three full staff shift with the three firefighters slash paramedics. It's to keep it at three with being down those two requires an awful lot of extra overtime by the remaining staff, which is taking its toll. So I think the short term is to drop down to two. We do have new hires coming on board. Those new hires have their paramedic certification, which is actually the more difficult one to obtain, so that we can be back to three in terms of ambulance staffing, but they will not have their firefighter credentials. That's a longer process. We have to send them to the academies. The next available academy is probably not until next spring. And so it is likely that we will have times when we just have two certified firefighters on staff rather than the three. Not ideal, but we do have mutual aid, and fortunately, we do not have frequent large fires in town. That's the good news.
Excuse me, is it safe to say, Greg, that we get more calls for paramedics than we do for firefighters?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, our ambulance calls are much higher than our actual fires. If you strip away the false alarms, most definitely. So not an ideal setup, but
How long does it take to go through the fire academy?
Chief Clary can better answer. I think it's a 12-week course.
It's 10 weeks.
10 weeks, okay.
Would it be possible, for example, to send one person to the fire academy in one session and one in the following session, so as not to take two people out at the same time?
I think, well, you could. It delays it even further.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that everybody's working double shifts all the time.
Right, well, like I say, I think in the interim, we don't require that doubling up of shifts. Just because of the burnout factor, we don't want to lose, we don't want to lose any more people.
I got a question for the chief. Now, is the academy a full-time, or is it like weekends? When they're
Monday through Friday.
Yeah, it's Monday through Friday, yeah.
Full days.
So this is just kind of an introduction and a prep for the budget discussions to come.
Well, so on fire, we do have the short-term issue that not a lot we can do. Longer term, though, there's the bigger question for staffing.
Yeah, because what I'm struggling with is if people have left, then the budget should be there to replace them.
Right, which we're doing.
Okay.
The
So
problem is that the replacement people will not be fully trained until next summer.
Right, okay.
That's the problem.
And to Ann's point then, rather than take two people and send the academy the same, can they still work under the offices of another certified firefighter?
So,
Can they be
so
on
this is
staff?
just, I'll be happy to answer that. I just want to, Greg kind of set it up. the issue we're running into is since I got here, we've had the staffing stay at 3, which in my opinion is the minimum safest to operate for both the citizens and the firefighters. When we had the 2 resignations, or the retirement and the resignation, we dropped to 11 firefighters. The floater went away because he had to get assigned to a shift. So we currently have 3 shifts with 3 people assigned and 1 shift with 2 people assigned. So in essence, there's 1 vacancy on 1 shift all the time. So we're currently trying to fill to 3 as much as possible. The firefighters union feel that staffing to 3 and forcing people to 3 with only 11 firefighters to pick from is unsustainable. Also, given that our budget was crafted based on 13 or 11 firefighters and 13 firefighters and 2 floaters to cover the overtime, now we have no floaters and 1 vacancy. That the $125,000 in overtime, $50,000 has already been spent, and it would cost $86,000 to cover that 1 vacancy with overtime until the end of this budget year. And that would not include covering any other vacation or sick time. So budgetarily, it's unsustainable as well. So we're trying to fill, if somebody is out for 24, we try and fill it. If we can't fill the full 24, we try and fill the 10-hour day shift. If we can't fill the 10-hour day shift, we try and fill the 14-hour night shift. There are several problems with dropping to 2. The first thing is, if the ambulance goes out of town and we only have 2 people and they transport to Beverly, that means the station remains unmanned for likely an hour or more while the ambulance is in transit and at the hospital, which means there's nobody in the firehouse to cover any additional calls, fire or EMS calls. When we are at staffing for 2, because of the Essex County Fire Chief and the NERAC rules, we cannot respond mutual aid if requested to any of our neighboring communities because the minimum staffing needs to be 3. So our engine, our ladder, and our ambulance does not go out of town when we only have 2. Only having 2 means we have a high likelihood that if we have anything significant, we're going to be relying on mutual aid. And then the question becomes, how mutual is that mutual aid if we're not able to give it, but now we become a bigger draw?
Right, but Chief, given where we are, the options are pretty limited, correct?
I'm not saying they're not limited. I just want people to understand what a 2-person staff means versus a 3-person staff.
Right, but we
Chief,
do
there's
have, we
something-
can staff with 3.
Right.
With the new hires. However, they will not be firefighter certified.
Right.
So we
So
still
without
have, we
being-
can still have that 3rd person in the station that is able to.
Once they are up and able to run EMS calls, they will be able to be one of the 2 people on the ambulance, which will leave a firefighter in the station to handle an additional call.
Correct. So that period, we're talking about a month's period.
Well, it may be longer than that, depending how long it takes to get them hired and on board.
Well, it shouldn't take more than a month to do that.
I hope not. And then with respect to getting them in the academy, because there have been such turnover in fire departments and hirings, the academies have been filling up very quickly. So the next academy at Stowe starts in May. So until they're firefighter trained, they can perform some ancillary firefighting fireground duties, but they do not count to the shift strength of 3 because they do not have firefighter certification.
Greg, I am, Chief, my apologies, I am somewhat confused. You said that you had, I think you said that you had budget for 13 regular and 2 floaters.
13 and 1 floater, the
And
new
1
position
floater.
was
Okay,
1
so
floater, yeah.
So
12,
14.
12 and 2 floaters.
12 and 2 floaters.
Okay.
We had been operating
14
with,
people.
right,
And how, and you had 2 resignations. That took-
1 resignation and 1 retirement, yes.
And that took the 14 down to 12, and now you seem to have 11, and.
No, we had 13,
Okay,
2
okay,
no
But-
longer,
okay,
dropped us down to the 11.
okay,
But we have budgeted for this new year 2 floaters rather than 1, so a second floater,
Which is a full-time position,
full-time position.
so we still have money set aside.
So,
Yeah, so we have 3 hires. They've been hired. They're going through the final stages of testing and physicals and that sort of thing. So we will have 14 bodies in another month or so.
so I'm sorry, I just have a really quick question, because I am equally as confused.
Sure, I apologize.
When discussing staffing, I need a bar chart, okay? I'm sorry, I need data, I need numbers. I need to know what has the staffing been over the last, go back 5 years, number of calls, okay? Something to quantify this discussion, because there's definitely pain here, I feel it, there's something wrong, but I need numbers. So I understand this is not a decision-making effort, I just want to be
Right.
clear on what I personally need. It's the numbers depicting staffing levels, mix of staffing, whether they be float, whatever, and the number of calls that were responded to in that year. And if the number of calls are going up, well, maybe we need to increase staff. If the number of calls are not, then maybe there are other solutions we need to pursue. That's one thing I personally need, something to look at. The other thing I personally need is benchmarking. So what are the other towns doing? Okay, are we spending more or spending less than comparable towns? Do we have more personnel or less personnel than comparable towns? I'm sure these questions have been asked and answered at prior FinCom meetings, but I have not.
There was a big report from the
Right.
FinCom 4 years or so ago.
Yeah.
And so maybe
so-
that could use some updating, I don't know.
I have a simple,
Yeah, a little bit of updating, it probably hasn't changed a lot.
Okay,
can I ask a simple question?
Yes,
What are we asking for?
that was gonna be my next
Okay.
question. What do
What do
we
you
need
want?
to
We
do? You've
have
got
money
budget,
budgeted.
you gotta go hire
Yeah,
folks,
so you
yeah.
got money budgeted for
Yeah.
14 firefighters, we only have 12, we're hiring 2.
What
What
do
is the
we need to
question?
do? Yeah.
What are we asking?
The problem is the lag in getting them certified so that they are fully functional.
But that's a problem that we can't control.
There's not a lot we can do with that. So, we want you to be aware of that.
Let's
And
consider us aware.
So I've got a question for the chief.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned mutual aid, which
Yes.
means I'll cover you if you cover me?
That's correct.
All right, so what if we turn that around and say, we haven't got the people to cover you, what do we have to do so that you cover us without any expectation of us covering you?
That doesn't
That comes
usually
with some sort of
happen.
a cost,
Um,
perhaps, but maybe it's something we have to put up on a temporary basis and just say, hey, if that's the case, and we need you to cover for a second call, you're doing it, but it's not gonna happen the other way around.
Some of our mutual aid partners have said that nothing will change. They'll still come and help us, and they understand our current predicament.
Yes.
Where it becomes a problem, under the mutual aid agreement, there's no money given or traded hands. One community doesn't charge the other community based on how many calls they come or how often they come, because the needs change back and forth. So it's kind of old school gentleman's agreement. We're there if you need us, if we can provide it, we'll come. The challenge becomes if the other community feels that their taxpayers in their department is supplementing our department because we're not doing something to keep our staffing where it needs to be to handle the number of calls. I don't believe that would result in a bill.
I think that's a valid concern, and therefore, when you do the benchmarking that I would like to see, please use the towns where we have the mutual aid agreements, because those would be the first places I'd look. You know,
It would
what
be
is-
all of Essex County. We all come under that municipal compact. So there are some that come earlier when
Right,
we
because
need
they're
help, and there
closer,
are some
right?
that come later.
But
For
I think
sure.
that's a valid thing to look at, but once again, I apologize, I'm a visual learner, and I gotta have something in front of me, the verbiage is just getting me all confused right now.
How much have you drawn on mutual aid, say, in the past, I don't know, year, 2 years? Is this a regular deal, or?
We go a lot more mutual aid with our ambulance,
Okay,
because we have paramedics. So that's what we provide mostly for
So-
mutual aid.
okay, so is that something we're doing once or twice a month, or?
And that can
No,
continue.
much more often than that, and I
Oh, okay.
presented a lot of the figures, which I can re-present. They were presented to the FinCom at the last budget
Oh,
time.
okay,
I do have charts and graphs and look at the number of simultaneous calls and things like that. There is data that does exist.
And
I
that
just
mutual
want
aid,
people,
that mutual aid can continue. That won't be affected by not
No.
having firefighters certified.
no, mutual aid will continue. I just wanted people to be aware that although we're hiring 3 new paramedics, they don't count towards our shift staffing of 3 full-time certified firefighter paramedics. So it limits the amount and the ability for us to do firefighting and rescue on standard calls, different than we do when we have 3 people currently. I just want to make people aware of that, and aware that if we only have 2 people and they're out of town on the ambulance, there is nobody covering the town.
okay.
Can I
But
make
again,
clear?
we can keep the 2, we can send the 2 that are just the paramedics
On the paramedic trolley.
on the paramedic call and keep the firefighter in-house.
Yeah.
Yeah, once we're at that level, yes, I'm talking about the here and now.
Well,
Well, for the next
That's
4
what I
weeks,
wanted people
I understand.
to be aware of.
I'll give you a pass.
Kathy has asked for some specific numbers, including the number of calls. And I'd like to clarify that we want to see 2 different types of calls. We want to see calls that are ambulance separate from calls that are fire. Does that
Okay.
I think absolutely correct, yeah.
Because it seems to me as if the bulk of our calls are ambulance and we have fully staffed EMT, then I'm okay with that at this point, and we'll deal with the other issues on a short-term basis. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Don't know
It
that we
is.
can do anything else.
Yeah, really is.
Yeah. Great, we're not going to suddenly have to go back in time and do the fire academy. Yeah.
So I guess the only other comment would be, I mean, certainly those, brush fires in Cape Ann, they were very nerve-wracking, grateful we didn't have anything out of control like that. I guess, just an open-ended question for future thinking, is there anything we can do to have a stronger pipeline or secession plan coming in?
So that gets into the future.
That gets into the
staffing.
future, right, so I don't want I didn't mean to start a big discussion
No,
right now.
But yes,
but
we need
just-
that discussion, and
Right.
that's when we talk about having 16 firefighters, so that when you have a retirement or someone leaves, then you can fall back to 3. I mean, I'm sure that the chief will make that strong argument.
In his
And
next
therefore-
budget cycle.
Correct.
And along with that, the benchmarking and use cases of towns that are already doing that. My point is, I don't feel we are not alone in this dilemma. Public safety staffing is just an egregious problem right now all over the place. And so I'm very interested in understanding what other towns are doing to solve these problems, because we shouldn't be going it alone.
And to that point, we're, right now, we might be short on firefighters,
Right.
but next month or 6 months from now, it might be another town. So the mutual aid thing, you gotta look at it a bigger picture,
Yes.
okay?
Yeah, and I think,
So I'm not-
as the chief indicated, I think most of his colleagues recognize that.
And I'm not concerned about all of a sudden someone pulling the plug on it, because we're not carrying out.
What
their
I
shift.
think our role here is, as a select board, is taking a look at these other towns and see how they're budgeting, okay? That's the comparison, because staffing is an issue of how well you bring people in, nurture them, and keep them on board, okay? Our role here as a board is, do we have the correct level of staffing? And that should be pretty easy to benchmark.
Yeah, and honestly, that's what was discussed at the previous FinCon meeting at the development of the
And I
last
look forward to
budget.
getting up to speed.
Okay.
So I can provide that, sure. I just didn't want anybody to have a false sense of
Yeah.
security that they're getting the same level of service with 2 on duty as they would at 3.
That's fair, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Where's your safer grant stand?
Have not heard back on the SAFER grant yet. They are started being awarded, but I haven't heard yet
Okay.
officially.
Then we're all gonna be fighting for the same firefighters.
How difficult is it to find firefighters now?
Well, for this last hiring process, we were hiring 3 and I had 7 applicants.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's very difficult. When I first came on the job, there were,
That's pretty slim.
Is
when
it
I
okay?
came, when I first came on the job, we had 450 people for 5
Okay,
openings.
that's a perspective.
Okay.
So, and it's nationwide currently.
Okay.
Is it
I
correct-
just read an article the other day that Seattle Fire Department, which is a huge fire department, overspent their overtime budget by $37.7 million in order to try and keep their staffing up.
Can we, I'd like to see a chart to Kathy's point, I'm not a big chart person, as to our compensatory package,
Mhm.
okay, versus with the surrounding towns. And, we're not, we're not Gloucester, but at least the other 3, other couple of Cape Ann
Do some
towns, and maybe
benchmarking,
one in
yeah.
Hamilton,
Yeah.
to find out, are we competitive?
Yeah,
Well,
We can
just
show
to
you
your,
that.
to your point, just so you know, there is not really the closest comparison to us in Essex County nearby is Middleton Fire. Gloucester, Beverly, Rockport, and Essex all function totally differently for different reasons on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Then I would ask that we use that as a benchmark, I guess.
Sure.
If that's your.
I just want to make you aware, if we're trying to keep apples to apples, and that's the closest to how we operate, size-wise, number of calls, and running an ambulance.
Middleton's the same size? What's, really, I would have thought that they
No,
were.
Middleton's bigger.
Yeah.
They're larger, but they're the closest in our area.
Okay.
Like Ipswich isn't that different, except they don't run an ambulance. So there are certain parameters and benchmarks like you're talking about that make us more like some and less
Okay,
like others.
then, I'm gonna, we'll leave it to you to cull through that information.
The-
Sure.
The study that the finance committee did several years ago did not use neighboring communities. It used comparable communities, which is to say affluent,
Yep.
seaside,
Acton
no, not, Hingham, Cohasset,
So I was gonna say
Marion.
Chatham,
Right.
anything seasonal, yeah,
Yeah, not as seasonal as Chatham,
Okay.
but yeah, it was.
That makes
it was-
total
That probably
sense.
does make some sense.
That's
that makes
fine.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
agree with that approach, we want comparable, not necessarily neighboring.
So just as a factoid, so to speak, Cohasset that we are compared to often, their budget is $1 million more than ours, and they have 6 firefighters and a full-time deputy chief on duty on every shift.
Right, they're twice as big as us.
Right, but at comparative, that's what their demographics are, staffing and budget-wise.
So it's really-
But we say though, we're looking, per capita, right, you gotta normalize the data,
Sure.
right,
Thank you. I'm good at this point.
yep, me too.
Okay, do we want to talk about?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
we
Chief.
have-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we satisfied with at least this as an introduction to the long term?
Mhm.
Okay, then I guess, Greg? should we go on to the police?
So on the police, yes.
Thank you, Chief, very much.
Yep,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, the issue here is more long-term, not short-term. And how we are going forward once the transition has been made to the regional dispatch, so anticipating that by next summer. So at the start of FY '24, what sort of staffing model do you feel is the most appropriate? So the chief has been working on some alternative modeling during the discussions about merging with the regional dispatch. There was a lot of discussion about maintaining some staffing for the lobby. And I think and the chief can elaborate on this, but I think from his perspective, and I think there's certainly some logic to it, to spend dollars on somebody just to do the lobby staffing solely, you're not getting as much value out of that dollar. So the chief would like to have a discussion with you about alternatives to that, and that is hiring more police officers who can do station work while also maintaining a presence for the lobby, if that remains an important piece going forward.
So rather than a dark lobby, we have a twilight lobby?
Well, it's more than twilight. It's more than twilight, I would say. I'd say the light's definitely on. That person, as a police officer, can do more than just what a receptionist might do, which is what we had sort of
Such as?
classified it as.
Such as?
Could they go on calls if need be?
I'm sorry?
Could they go out on a call if need be?
Right, so certainly that
Okay.
So then
is,
then the lobby's unmanned.
yes, for short periods of time, correct.
So I think that, as I recall, part of the, when we were going to regional, was the discussion of keeping the lobby manned, all right? Or woman,
Yeah.
okay, person,
Attendant.
attendant, thank you.
Attendant
Thank you.
staff.
Peopleized. Okay, so this is not a surprise to anyone that we're looking to staff the lobby at this point. This was part of the discussions to go to regional. Okay.
Yeah.
So now is what he wants to staff with.
So the assumptions during the latter part of the dispatch debate was that there would be staffing in that, for the lobby, a minimum of 16 hours a day.
2 shifts.
yeah.
Basically the day and evening shifts. The chief has done some analysis, and by going to an officer format and by having additional officers, you can significantly reduce your overtime as well. Because again, if you had, similar to what the fire is contemplating long-term, even though you have more staff potentially at one time, if someone's out on vacation or other leave time, you don't backfill it. You drop down to the lower number which you had prior. So it eliminates a lot of overtime. And so
Makes sense.
you can shift some of your overtime costs to salaries, and your net additional cost isn't as high as you might think it would be. But let's bring in the chief, and he can elaborate on some of the thinking. And again, this is preliminary information. And again, what additional data you would find helpful as we consider the options.
Exact same.
Yeah,
Charts,
ditto,
number
right?
code, ditto. But yes,
Save
let's hear
ourselves
from
20
Todd.
minutes right now, just say everything. Chief?
Oh, we're not hearing you, chief.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Did you guys get a chance to view the memo and the spreadsheet that I sent over with the staffing model and the benefits of the lobby staffing with a police officer? I don't know if you guys had a chance to review that.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so staffing with the police officer, obviously has a lot of benefits. It helps with booking, prisoner watch, transport to Middleton Jail if we have someone that is held without bail. filling details, endless administrative tasks, and obviously answering business calls that would come in that need to be answered. It also gives officers, so we're not running into like a 111F issue like we currently have, an option to work light duty if they are injured or have some sort of ailment that does not allow them to go out onto the street. So the spreadsheet that I came up with, and we looked at a couple of different staffing models or changing hours of work, which we thought we could go to 12-hour shifts. That would give us 2 platoons of 3 officers and 2 platoons of 4. But we really, to cover that long term and to make sure we have lobby staffing, we would really need 16 patrol officers. So the thought or the process that we kind of came up with on my spreadsheet is we would hire 2 additional police officers, and theoretically that would give us lobby staffing not only 16 hours a day, but 24 hours a day. And if you could see on there, it does not include the school resource officer. So in long-term thinking, that school resource officer, when that position comes out of the school during the summer, we could dedicate that to traffic, we could dedicate that to water, or even like a small community impact type of unit, where they just go out and do community events and certain other things. But I, off the top of my head, I would like to see that more dedicated to assist Bion with some of the issues that we got going out, on the harbor today. So some of the shifts are staffed with 4. I've spoken to the union, about this. There's sort of in agreement. Someone's on vacation. You don't have to backfill. You would run with 3. If someone's on vacation, calls in sick, well then either we backfill it, depending on the time of day or what's going on in town, or we just run with 2 and then we run the safe lobby. It would significantly cut down on our overtime. We average, I did a 3-year average, we spend about $170,000 a year. I would see that probably going less than 60,000. I mean, we still have to have some overtime. I see the overtime as like a snow budget. It's difficult to forecast because you never know really what's going to come down the road. It gives us flexibility to do a lot of things, and also it eliminates the need for our reserve use, or it will definitely cut down on that. Because with that January 1st of 2027 is coming, where all the reserves need to be Bridge Academy and have 2,400 hours. Most of our reserves will probably have the Bridge Academy if needed, but we're not sure they're going to be making the 2,400 hour benchmark, so to speak. So if they don't have that, then they can't work for us anymore. So this I see it could be a win-win. It all depends on what the town wants and the direction that you give me about the lobby staffing, and not backfilling and dropping down and maybe having that safe lobby on occasion. But the schedule I came up with theoretically will staff our lobby 24/7. So
I have a question.
Yep.
Chief Fitzgerald, what strikes me is maybe a little bit different, and I could be totally wrong on this, so please
Yep.
correct me, about the police versus the fire is, do you have, we just talked water and having a seasonal bump. Do you have a seasonal uptick in activity during the summer? Right?
Yeah, so our highest month typically is July. August is probably the second month. So you'll start seeing an increase in calls starting late May, and then it will slowly go down, through October and.
So of the
November.
options you have looked at, are any of them taking that seasonal differentiation into account? Because
No,
the
this
summer
is-
is a short period of time.
Yeah, no, the only option that, in regards to the seasonal thing, is with the SRO, where we could manage or man the boat, or have those hours available, or that position available to staff, harbor hours and what's going on out in the water.
So I've got a question. I'm trying to understand the grid that you sent out with
Yep.
all of the colorful bars.
Yep.
And, yeah, that's right, going through coloring. So I don't quite, are the colors, other than the fact that they represent, I suppose, people various rank,
Yep.
and they're on there, but it's for each day. And then I guess you've got 3 shifts here.
3 shifts, the midnight, the day shift, and the evening shift. And the colors just really differentiate
Who's on?
who's on, yeah.
What are the asterisks?
Yeah.
So the asterisks are the new, would be the new positions that we would hire.
Thank you.
And they're on a split. So those people are on a split shift. So you see the gray up top. So say extra officer 2 with the asterisk, you see he or she works 4 to 12, 2 days a week, and then is back at midnight the next day.
So it's covering actually two half shifts.
Yeah, so midnight to 8, midnight to 8, and 4 to 12, 4 to 12. So he works, so he gets off at 8 o'clock in the morning and is back at 4 o'clock that afternoon. So it's like a short day in the middle, and a lot of departments use that model. I know my son's on it in Georgetown.
The reserve officer, so these added administrative, the added time in the lobby, if we were to go that route, does those hours work towards accreditation in the next 3 years?
In regards to their time, so currently they have to have 2,400 hours, and lobby time or dispatch time, only 50% of those hours can count towards their 2,400 hour requirement.
Would that be different if they were an officer in the station rather than counted as a receptionist?
Yes. Yeah.
So those would be full hours.
Those would be full hours, yeah.
So if they were hired as officers who happen to have.
Who happen not to be in a car.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to be working in a capacity as a police officer with the power of arrest. So yes, that would count. And road details do not count. However, like if they're working a high school football game or a private party, those hours do count.
Okay. So question, I mean, before we were looking at with a dark reception area during the midnight to 8 o'clock in the morning, how many police officers are on duty then, normally? When it was gonna be a dark, office? Just 2?
2.
Okay, and so you're going from 2 to 5?
On the midnight shift?
Yes.
Well, there's only 3 on at all times. So you're only adding 1 per shift.
Right, you're adding that, so, but what you show here is a sergeant, an officer, and an extra officer?
But not all at one time. You have to.
Not
so
all at
the
one
color
time.
Oh,
represents
excuse
when
me,
they're
all
on.
right, the color is, yes,
That's when they're on duty.
that's when
Yeah.
they're on duty.
Yeah.
Okay,
So they work a 4-day on and 2-day off schedule by contract.
right,
And,
so,
and then on the day shift, if you had to drop down, obviously during the week, myself and the lieutenant are here, so you could actually drop down to 2 if someone was on vacation and called out sick.
right,
And then, we're here to answer the lobby, and, my administrative assistant is as well, so.
So this particular, I guess I heard that you've looked at multiple options.
Yep.
But I'm not sure I understand what they are. I've only heard the one option. So that's one thing that's confusing me. So let me add something to my list of requests, is show us what the options are that you looked at and why you are recommending one over another. But the benchmarking for me is pretty important,
Yep.
because we are a small town, a blessedly quiet town, and safe town, and due to, in no small part to the work of your team. But I'm very interested in understanding how our staffing levels compare to other towns. And I'd rather not confuse that issue by mixing it with the lobby coverage. To me, that's lobby coverage. If we decide that that is a commitment we made to the residents and we are gonna do that, then there are different ways of doing that. And I'd rather you come forth and say, here are the calls we're getting, they've increased, I need more. Or if that's not the case, then explain to us why you need more. But I'd rather, personally, I'd rather separate the issue. I think combining it with the lobby discussion confuses it a little bit, because if these are gonna be, officers who can go out and call, then we're not meeting our commitment to the residents to keep somebody in the lobby. So, that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, but I need my visuals, sorry.
I'm trying to think, another question. The scenario that we had before this, we had an attendant that was covering the lobby, correct, Chief?
Well, we have a dispatcher that's covering it now, but, the
No,
thought
but-
was either have a public safety clerk, but then that public safety clerk, can take the information, but is still calling someone in off the road.
But here you're supplanting that person with the police officer.
With a police officer who can do multiple
Right,
duties, yeah.
So it's a Swiss Army knife kind of thing.
yes, no,
How many times did we need to use the Swiss Army knife?
Yeah.
Yes.
The screwdriver?
Right, how many times? So that's where the data is helpful when
Right.
making staffing decisions.
But what I'm also hearing is that by doing this, we can cut back significantly on the overtime.
So I want to, the question is so how does the money add up on all of this?
Well,
We're
like I
still
said,
working on that.
Yeah, the overtime is difficult to, predict, because you never know what's gonna happen. But it's, this model that I'm proposing is definitely gonna cut down on the use of reserves. We have, some reserves that are working 40 hours a week to cover shifts, and cut down on the overtime, because the need to backfill would be minimal.
So does that become a net break-even sort of thing with those assumptions, or
Not quite.
I mean,
not quite?
No,
not quite, but significant.
So I don't understand that comment when it comes to the summertime, because we understand that there is more activity during the summer. So this whole concept, what sounds like level staffing and minimizing overtime, that's traditionally a very good concept when you don't have spikes in demand for your services. We have a 3-month spike in demand, and I'm just not understanding how this helps us with that. It seems like we would still need to use reserve officers or overtime to deal with the summer,
No,
so.
because you're adding more patrol on the street in a sense, or the option of.
But my question is, why, if the other months are quieter? So when you have uneven demand, normally you staff to a certain level and use temporary resources to handle these spikes. That's a common approach, and so I'm just not,
In public safety,
right.
it doesn't work.
Well, it depends where you set your level.
Right, but you can't, it's very difficult to up staff for just a few months.
And plus,
That
we're
really doesn't
going-
work in public safety.
So then what are we having them do the rest of the time? Yeah, so. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I'm saying we have to remember down the road, we can't hire any more reserves. If we hire a reserve officer, it's gonna be a retired person has to be full-time academy trained. So there are no more options to hire reserves. The current reserves we have to be trained at the same level as a full-time police officer and have the hours by January 1st of 2027. So this model helps with that down the road.
Right, so again, that's what we need to show that staffing. So we
Need to see
traditionally
that.
have had 10 to 12 reserve officers. And this model basically says 0 reserve
Okay,
officers.
and what is Cohasset doing? What is Hingham doing? What are other towns doing? And what does our staffing look like
Yep.
compared to them? I
Yep.
appreciate what
I
we're
have
trying
all
to
that,
do
and I
here.
can get
Yeah,
that to you.
The other question I have, simply put, is if we're committed to staffing the lobby, what is the differential, what's the delta between an administrative person and a police officer? And if it's, to me.
So we can show you
if
those
it's- yeah,
comparisons.
To me,
Yeah,
it becomes, again, the Swiss Army knife issue here, that for a couple of dollars more, we have another police officer available to the chief. It seems to make sense to me.
that piece can make sense. However, if a resident goes to the lobby and nobody is there because they are expecting somebody to be there because that's what we promised them, but this officer has to go out onto a call, okay? They're getting a dark lobby anyway, and so we're not meeting our commitment to the resident. That, I specifically remember that resident feedback. They wanted people in, somebody there. They wanted a human, okay? And whether or not that's something that can be changed over time, perhaps that's not something that's, we just need to get that comfort factor, and it's a transitional thing, but they were very specific. They wanted somebody in there. And if this option does not guarantee that, I'm not sure that we've met our commitment to the resident. That's my, so I'm wondering, is it really one more person, or is it really 2 more persons, that we're asking for?
I've got a question on the seasonality and fluctuation of staffing. Chief, this is, the grid you've got here is January.
Yeah,
Could I take this grid and shift it to July and it's gonna look the same?
look the same.
All right, so that's my question. Are you, all these reserve people, that doesn't add any more people on the street in July than you have in June. It's just a question of who's available, and maybe you have people that are on vacation and it becomes a little bit more difficult to staff, so you have to go for the reserve folks.
Right.
But the body count does not change.
Well, the FTE, so our role as a
Right.
board is the FTE, okay?
That
Full-time equivalent, the budget.
does
and
not
then-
change.
And then the staffing, how you use that money, that's an operational decision,
Okay,
right?
all right, yeah,
I just
so.
want to make sure I'm clear on our responsibility as a board.
So you're using reserve folks to fill in for people that, I don't know, they're hurt, they're on vacation, they're sick, or something like that, and you have to go to get reserve folks to fill in, correct?
I have 2 reserve officers that work 40 hours a week.
Okay, and that they're in there just because the flow of demand for time and what you've got structured in, it doesn't fit, and you have to use these other police officers to make it work. Okay,
Correct.
all right. So we don't have a seasonal change?
No.
There's no seasonal change?
Our
That's
call
interesting.
volume is definitely seasonal, but
Oh,
the
okay, but
staffing
you're-
level.
The staffing, no.
The
Staffing,
staffing is the same all the way down the line. And I mean, I agree with Kathy that we certainly need to have people during the day, in the evening, at, in the, that are staffing the office, but overnight, if somebody gets called out for some reason, I mean, right now, we're thinking that maybe it might be dark from time to time, I'm not sure. Right now, you've got that extra officer in there, but there could be circumstances under which that officer might be called out.
Wouldn't we be happy that we had an officer that could call them?
Pardon me?
Depends,
Well,
gotta see the numbers.
depending on, this is becoming, we're talking all kinds of scenarios here.
Yeah.
Right now, I
Okay.
think we need to think a little bit about the dollars.
Well, and that's why I'm asking.
We're not- we
committed
haven't
to putting
assigned
some
it.
monies into the lobby. How much more money is gonna cost to make it a police officer versus an administrative or some other person? And that's what
There's a
I'm-
difference between establishing a budget for a certain number of FTEs and making decisions about how that budget is used. Our job, to Ann's point, is about making sure we're providing the right budget to town meeting, so town meeting can approve those dollars, okay? But I don't think we need to, is it our job to approve the hiring of the staff and what mix the chiefs, either one of them? I don't see that as our role. I see the chiefs coming forth with data that shows we need to support these number of calls. These are the trends. Here's the FTEs based on benchmarking, and
We have
Yeah.
another responsibility, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, and that is, we've made a commitment to the town
Yep.
that there will be
Right.
a person there. And one of the things that we're now thinking about is, would it be okay if sometimes the person wasn't?
Well, I think that.
And that's not an FTE issue.
I agree with you, and my point was to separate the two. What I hear coming from both chiefs is they feel they need extra staffing, and one way to get it is to combine with the staffing of the lobby. And I'm saying, separate out the lobby, that's a separate discussion, we should.
It can't be separated if the solution involves somebody being there part-time.
No, I agree with you, but what I'm suggesting is, I feel that the chiefs are trying to help us understand that they feel they need more staffing, period, even if the lobby was not a discussion point. They are both trying to make the case for increased staffing. And I think that involves data that shows why and a budget discussion. That's really my only point. And I understand that one of the proposed solutions is to mix, the lobby discussion with the staffing discussion, but what I hear them both saying is they could use more people. That's what I hear them both saying.
Okay, but I also understand that the lobby discussion has to be had. We have made a commitment to staff in the lobby. If the police chief can tell us, I'm gonna make sure that these police officers now can float into another position, okay? But once they're scheduled for the lobby, they're not going anywhere, okay? That takes care of the dock.
Then why do we need that?
Because it affords the police chief a little bit more leeway in, there could be a full-time police officer, and maybe one of their shifts is, and I don't know.
Well, but
Todd,
I'm
you
just
can speak
saying,
to that.
if it's a police officer manning the lobby and somebody needs help, are they really just gonna commit to stay there? No, they're gonna, I don't know. I think that we're getting
I think
probably
the
too
public, I think we
detailed
can
for
come
this
to reach
discussion.
this, I think the public would understand,
Yeah.
I
that's my.
think we're approaching 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of other things to talk about, and I think we've covered a lot of the issues, and Chief Fitzgerald has been very helpful.
Yep.
And I appreciated his
Colorful shop.
the benefits essay.
Mhm.
It was very clear. But I think we can say, let's move on to liaison updates.
Well, the next discussion here, attach a few numbers to this.
Yes,
That's all.
Numbers, not just
numbers,
For the
comparisons,
scenario. Yes.
benchmarks.
That's correct.
Dollars and calls and other information from other towns.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yep.
Understand.
Okay. Brian,
Yes, ma'am.
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, what, pickleball and Pine Street, what do you want to talk about? I know that, I read Becky's email, I actually stopped in today, I spoke with Cheryl. And there's a solution, they feel, a short-term solution that they'll be presenting to the full Parks and Recreation Committee to address the noise complaints of the neighbors. That's item number one. I'm not sure. I've heard it, it sounds good to me, it sounds reasonable, it sounds rational, okay? Whether or not others agree, we'll find out when it's made to the full board on, was it next Wednesday, I believe? Upper Pine Street, now we're getting to the point where there's some questions as to the logistics and as to parking, safety, is half a field versus a full field, the value to that. And so it just basically has to, I think that Parks and Recreation just have to appease or just make people aware of exactly what the thought process is there. And I think that Cheryl's got them both under control at this point.
And you have anything from the library?
I honestly,
Okay.
I figured it was sweat the library. So. But no, I've got to, I will take care of that. That's on my hand.
And ZBA and
Well, we all know the ZBA has filed their denial,
Mhm.
and I don't recall when the 20-day clock is up for the response, but do you recall, Brian?
I haven't heard anything, so
Yeah,
we,
yeah.
I think it was filed on the 30th.
30th.
Yeah.
30th with,
So,
so is it 20 calendar days or 20 work days?
I think it's calendar.
I think it's
Okay.
calendar.
So we should know something next week.
Next week.
Uh,
So then on the planning board did want to request time on the select board agenda to provide us an update on their zoning proposals before the next town meeting. And so my question to this board is there anything specific you would like to see? And I can work with the planning board to make sure that we are provided the information that you'd like.
Is this for our meeting, our next meeting, when the planning board meets with us?
They requested time on an agenda. I don't have a date.
So we tentatively have it for the 19th.
For the
Yeah,
19th,
that's what I
okay.
thought.
So is there anything specific that you would like to see? Because I think they were planning to review the zoning changes. They were working either impacts or risks and opportunities to each of those changes. I have not seen that yet. So, but it's really more, I'm not here to report so much on their activities so much as ask this board, is there anything specific that you would like to see?
Just I'm curious as to, will they be prepared in time to give the public enough notice before town meeting?
So I believe at their next meeting on the 12th, there's some outlining
Okay, that's what we're gonna find.
every week between
Okay.
now and
Yeah.
and November 14th.
That's my only concern. That's why I want, I think that,
Do you want to understand better the communication to
right,
the
because
public?
I haven't seen
Yes,
anything yet.
I,
You know, so
Um,
I still have no idea what I'm gonna be looking at.
Yeah, I'm interested in how it's gonna be presented. What kind of a layout, kind of a grid that people can look at and say, to see what's going on.
Excuse me, I like to think that I'm the simplest of the 5 of the board members. Okay, so I think everything should be tailored towards me.
Well,
Okay.
you're
and-
probably one of the most experienced land use people we
Okay,
have on the
but,
district.
Yeah.
So
remember,
Don't cut
I
yourself.
got my bachelor's in history, so what do I know?
Ann, anything in particular?
there are two sorts of changes that they're
Mhm.
talking about.
Yes.
One is just recodifying what exists in a clearer manner. And there are 3 areas, I think, which are new. Residential
Yeah.
clusters,
Senior,
ADUs,
Yeah.
and
senior, was it?
senior housing.
Yeah.
And what are they thinking about splitting those off? So that the town's problem with adding accessory dwelling units
Mhm.
doesn't torpedo
Right.
the,
When you say splitting them off, do you mean
either,
separating the agenda at the
either-
town meeting?
how are they planning to handle that so that they don't
Got it.
lose the good,
Yes.
trying to get the great?
How do you handle that separation so people aren't confused and
And do you do it all in one meeting? Do you try and get one piece in and then come back? What are they thinking?
I believe the current plan, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, was to present all of the proposed changes. I don't know if that
But
has
in
changed.
separate articles.
But each one of them is separate, but I think what Ann is suggesting is
Right.
you know,
Well,
how
yeah.
are you grouping them in the communication so it's clear that these 5 or whatever are just recodifications, no changes, no impact?
And the awkwardness is that they aren't.
Yeah.
Because there are things that they have been advised are, that we're currently doing which are not sustainable in court.
Okay.
And they're not big things.
It's aligning our bylaws with the law,
Yes,
some of them.
yes.
Some of them, so that's not administrative to your point.
It's not
necessarily.
no change.
Right,
It's not
right,
no change.
Yeah.
okay.
And when they say it's no, I'm sorry, I'm going off.
No, but that's a perspective though. So when they say there is no change, that could be misinterpreted because in fact there may be a change to align with state law.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay.
So,
Plan to communicate that or make that clear.
okay. Is the ZBA doing anything other than, relaxing after having?
Oh, no, the agenda is full.
I've not been to an appointment.
We've got a couple of visits, and then there's an appeal of a decision
Mhm.
coming up in September.
Mhm.
At some point, I'm gonna resign. I'm just not sure when. All right. The only reason I stuck as long as I did was through the 40B process, and now there's still other things that seem to be, in my opinion, important, and I don't want to leave the board light a person until I'm comfortable that I can leave it without leaving a hole on the. It's tough, as we all know. It's tough finding people to volunteer for these positions.
John,
Well, I think the water we're pretty much up to date on an hour and a half or so ago, so I'm not going to spend time on that. That project continues to move along. I think pretty well with regard to the Department of Public Works. They're integrated into that process pretty much, and certainly Nate and Chuck attend many of the meetings and discussions there, and they are in the process of putting together a grid that will lay out where all of the surrounding towns, how they get their water.
Mhm.
And how they manage their water. Some of those folks get water from the same place we get water, but we don't necessarily know that. Well, Chuck and Nate do. From the same aquifer, from the North Shore, whatever it is, basin, something like that. We need to know that because we need to be fairly well, acquainted with those towns that do draw from the same water source. Because if we have a problem, they have a problem. We all have the same problem. So that's something that we'll pull together, and in fact, will probably be one of the deliverables that will be coming to this board in the coming months. So that's it, I think. It's mostly all about water right now.
I did not make it to the most recent Concom. It's coming up. And the Council on Aging hasn't let me know that they're back in season, in working season. I did, however, attend the most recent school committee meeting. The school committee has an interesting problem. The chair is in her 3rd year on the board. There are 2 people who have been there for 1 year completely. And there are 3 people who were newly elected this year. They have a remarkable job. The superintendent and the business manager have got a lot of education to do. And it's a complicated situation because the schools are an independent organization, and people tend to assume that if they're an independent organization, they will operate independently from the rest of the world. And so there's some work that needs to be done explaining, you know, that their budget isn't just theirs, and they have, as I think everyone's aware, a long-term operational deficit. They've had it since the region formed, and it has been dealt with in the past by doing overrides. And they are coming up, and in terms of budget, they are looking at either they ask the town for more money, or they cut program. And if your view is that I'm a parent, I was elected to make the schools good, cutting program is anathema. So that part has to be worked through. Much of the meeting was on the district improvement plan and the goals that were set that developed the district improvement plan. And they're part of the problem, again, is people are relatively new to the school. And I sometimes think that things in town move at glacial speed, but glaciers are fast compared to changes in schools. And the district improvement plan lays out the steps. They need to, if they want to change something, they need to find a program that will affect that change. That program has to be introduced to the administrators. Then it has to be introduced to the teachers, and then 5 years later, the kids get some benefit.
By that time it's too late.
No, it isn't too late. It's too late for those kids.
That's right. The kids are
And it's probably outdated.
You know, I've watched this for some time, and yes, there are really good changes that have happened in the school system since we regionalized 22 years ago. It's a lot better, but the process is remarkably slow. And so I talked to Pam after the meeting, and she's confident that she will be able to bring everyone along, get their support, and continue the direction that they set 2 or 3 years ago. But if no one on the board was there when the decision to go happened, there's a big education that has to.
There's no institutional memory.
Well, there is institutional memory,
But not a
fortunately.
lot, but not a lot.
But it's on the professional, it's on the
Administrative side.
the administrative side. And so she has their trust, I trust, and she will keep it. And that's how that works. So. Right. Now we have, unless anybody has more questions about, yeah. The next item is public notices.
Yeah, these are really, FYIs, wetland abutters notice for project on 208 Summer Street. Again, just FYI on that. The Seaport Economic Council, I think I reported on that, but we do have the official letter. So grant funding to do the engineering work at the rotunda, which will be getting underway, which will include an alternative siting analysis to see if there's any appetite for a different location in order.
I mean, putting it inland.
Yes, to try to preserve. That will not be a
I
popular.
heard one putting it further out into the harbor.
That gets into the channel, I think.
That'll be,
I think that what the plan I heard was building new pilings and just beyond where it stands now. Okay, because it's and that way it's viewed. I don't know if it's in the navigable channel. I think Bion was like that idea, and then just moving it up, and then that creates an applicable ADA ramp too. The run and rise on the ramp.
Because it's further out and we've got more run. Good.
So that's what I heard, which I kind of.
Creative,
Yeah.
very good.
Okay, so those are the sorts of things that they're looking at?
Yes, yeah, they'll be looking at a number of different options.
mhm.
I
So
think
that
logs
would-
and land. is my opinion.
They'll be coming back before you, late
Winter.
fall, early winter. As we work on that. We're allowed to have a seat on the MBTA advisory board. We don't have anyone serving in that capacity. It can be someone from this board, one of you, or you could take a volunteer in the community. So,
When do you need an answer
Flyer
on
in.
that?
Yeah, when do you need an answer?
I was just looking right at Ian.
yeah, a couple, within the
That's gonna
next,
take time.
within the next month, we should make that decision. It's been
Okay.
vacant for a while.
I've got someone in mind, I was gonna find out if they'd be interested. Okay.
What's involved with,
Yeah, I tried to look on the website to get some information, I couldn't make
So
any
it's
heads or
a
tails.
sounding board for the MBTA. They meet, I think they meet quarterly.
But is this one of the subcommittees, because there's the big MBTA advisory board, like, that Michelle Wu was trying to get on, because Boston's not represented, so there's different boards, and I'm trying to,
So this is the advisory board that doesn't have any decision-making
Okay.
authority. It's simply a rep from every town and city.
every town, and city, okay.
and do they go to
MBTA
meetings
serves.
quarterly or
I
something?
think either quarterly or every other month. I'll have to double check.
If I give up the ZBA, I get an extra night.
So,
That's a Zoom meeting, or, I mean, is it
they
something
have been
going
doing
in?
them Zoom.
Yeah,
At some point they'll, I don't know if they'll do a hybrid or what. What's-
All right.
What's in their future.
otherwise maybe you have to go into Boston for that or something,
Right.
which is.
On the MBTA.
Well,
As long as
You
you're
got
on the
a
orange
pass.
line, you're okay.
You got pass with the deal?
I don't think
If
you
nobody
get a pass.
steps up, I can fill the void,
Yeah.
but,
I'll
if
consider it
there's
as well.
somebody,
I'll-
I can, because I'm even in Boston twice a week, it's not really an issue, but, if there's somebody more appropriate, I'm happy to let them do it.
Cool, that's good. I think you've done consent, so on to my report.
Yes.
Okay. So I can do this fairly quickly. School Street construction, yes, despite the inconvenience of it, they are making good progress. They are on target to wrap it up in October. So they pretty much have completed the work, beyond, between Pleasant and the country club. So that section won't be blocked until they get back to pulling everything out. Hopefully they'll be past Lincoln Street by the end of this week. But it'll continue to be inconvenient for another month or so. They do take pauses when school is coming or going to facilitate buses and parent pickup. Parents picking up their children. So that's that. Compost facility, we're running into a bit of a delay. The state hasn't issued the permit. They say there's no problem with it. It's just bureaucracy moving slowly. So we are starting to slip on that schedule. We're hoping to get word from the state soon as to when we can expect that permit to be released so that we can better plan and make sure that's not too long of a delay here to get them going. So more to follow on that. Special town meeting, as you know, we're scheduled for the 14th of November. The main topic is the recodification and various amendments to the zoning. You get an update from the planning board at your next meeting about that. We have received one citizen petition article with the requisite signatures. Over 100 signatures are required for a special town meeting petition. And this is asking voters to approve a new recall provision for elected officials. So if that were to be approved at town meeting, it would then need to go to the legislature for a special act. So it's a two-step process. Again, if voters want to advance that, that's how that would work. Petition deadline for the November 14th is 28 days ahead of the meeting, so October 17th is the deadline for any petition articles. Moving on, harbor discussions, so slated for your next meeting. a discussion about the possibility of pursuing a harbor master plan. A group of residents have contacted an engineering firm to help sort of assess. This was somewhat precipitated by the expansion plans at the two marinas. So this is separate from the Sand Dollar Cove issue. I just want to emphasize that. There's been a lot of chatter out on social media about the 19th being the time when you're going to make decisions about Sand Dollar Cove. That is not the case. The discussion on the 19th is focused on moorings and floats and expansion of the harbor proper, not outside of the mouth of the channel. So Sand Dollar Cove is not part of the agenda for the 19th. That may be a future topic at a later date. Public Safety, Harbor Master Department, and Police Department, working with the HAC, will be looking for them to develop potential recommendations. And once they do that, then we'll put it on an agenda for you to discuss. So I don't anticipate that until November at the earliest. So just want to be clear about that to folks. And then lastly, I was scheduled to have the second part of your workshop on Monday, 4 o'clock. Provided some outlines of how we might approach that. I'm looking for your input. Not looking for that right now, but just send me an email individually and I can incorporate some of your thoughts as we prepare for Monday's meeting.
How long is that meeting expected to go?
So I'm assuming it'll be another 2.5 hours or so.
Okay.
Planning board is scheduled for 6:30 that evening. If we can be done by 6:30, that would probably be helpful.
We can make that happen.
So those are my updates, and the last item is an executive session to talk about some negotiations with clerical union.
And that means that someone needs to pull people outside to close down the meeting and
Don't get up.
reconvene.
Okay.
So first a motion.
I'm sorry. Right, that has to be done. So, I move that we enter executive session, not to return to open session for MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy with respect to contract negotiations with clerical union if an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body and the chair so declares, and I do so declare. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Yep.
Roll call vote. Yes.
Yes.